they think that, my show is valuable enough that they want to give their time to it. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yeah. I had
Because you had Temple Grandin on,
yeah.
didn't you? It's
Yeah, I
that
thought
same.
yeah.
That one was crazy for me, and I'm sure it was for you because
Hmm. Hmm.
it was just like a surreal experience to be talking to her. Because HBO made a movie about her. I
Right.
mean, her people outside. A lot of people outside of agriculture know her for her work with autism,
Hmm.
and she was just. It was like, and I'm sure you probably felt the same. You're just like, man, I feel totally not worthy to be
Right.
talking to you. But
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, we're revisiting an old guest of ours as we have with this whole season. And this one is one that hasn't been on the show in quite a while. It's a fun conversation to have, though. So why don't you go ahead and reintroduce yourself to the crowd? The host of Ag State of Mind, Jason Meadows.
thanks for again for having me back. Really, gosh, I guess it has been a while since we've chatted. So much time. So much has happened in just these last few years. It's just been incredible. But excuse me. My name's Jason Meadows. Again, host of the Ag State of Mind podcast. I'm from outside Cuba, Missouri, which is about halfway between Springfield and St. Louis in Missouri, kind of the south central region, if you will. Um, I was born and raised on a cow calf operation. My dad owned a local livestock market. I was kind of involved in agriculture growing up, but not as heavily as I was until I left for school and came back. Um, I am a pharmacist. That's where what I went to school for. So I've wanted to kind of bring those two worlds of mine together, and that's how kind of the podcast was formed. Ag State of Mind, where we talk about health, well-being, mental health, mindset, all the things that are going to make the human element of a farm more adaptable, more resilient. Basically showing that the human asset of a farm or ranch is the most important part, and not, if the farmer or rancher is not healthy, then the farm and ranch cannot be healthy. So that's kind of my whole approach, is trying to get everybody the best mentally, physically, spiritually, just a holistic approach to health, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I perfectly agree with you. And one of the big things that I've been trying to do is really bring the humanity back to agriculture, kind of remind
Hmm.
people, that at the end of the day, we're all humans running these farms. And I think that your podcast does an excellent job of that because, there's nothing more human than struggling, with real issues that, everyone goes through. So you definitely do a great job of running that into that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and it's you know trying to bring relatability. Excuse me, relatability to it is really key.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed, more recently, I've been kind of keeping up with your project. I noticed, you have been having conversations lately with people in these, larger spaces like on Twitter about mental health and agriculture and ways to, work through that and kind of work together as an industry on that kind of stuff. And I actually got to catch one of those conversations. So I haven't been able to keep up with everything, but has that been going? Have you been able to have some more of those interesting conversations about that kind of stuff?
I mean, I have scaled back my use of social media quite a bit over the last couple of months because it got a little bit overwhelming for
Mm.
me. So in a short answer to your question, I have not continued on a grand scale, but I have. I mean, but the podcast is still rolling and still having super interesting people and super interesting conversations. I actually took a break from podcasting for pretty much for the holidays. I didn't, I was traveling a lot. I had some speaking events, and it was actually really nice because coming back into the new year, I have found myself to be so much more energized and so like remember why I started the podcast in the first place. So, I'm one of those people who I like will go until I break down, and I have to slow down a little bit. I have to put the brakes on myself a little bit, and thankfully I was able to do that and come back. And it's one of the things I talk about, right? It's
Mhm.
one of the things that I make sure I talk about, and every time I speak to a group or to an organization is I want to like normalize that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to chill out for a bit, um, because you're going to be way more productive after the break than you would have if you would have just kept pushing through and not taking that time away. And I think that's a hard thing for people to understand, and it's a hard thing for people to swallow, especially in agriculture, because nobody has ever said that and nobody ever talks like that, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh no, you got to tough it out. And I don't want to like discount that. I mean, it is important to tough stuff out. It is important to be resilient, but sometimes part of that resiliency is realizing that, being very self-aware and being able to take that time away and like reset yourself and realize that you'll show up much better if you just take a step back for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did the same thing that you did. I took a few months off of podcasting to allow myself to kind of, regroup and get my thoughts together. And that was possibly one of the best decisions I made for the
Good
podcast.
for
And
you.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it was hard, for sure. It was definitely not something that I
Hmm.
was happy about doing, but I noticed the quality of my episodes were getting just worse and worse, and my energy towards the episodes is getting worse. And I
Yeah,
just,
that's what it was for me, is just
yeah.
my energy for it. Like, and I actually reached out Will Evans, who he was on my podcast early, and he was on the used to have his podcast, the Rock and Roll Farming Podcast. He's from
Mm,
Wales, so really interesting guy. But anyway, I know that he has taken many breaks, and I think he's actually completely shut his podcast down now.
wow.
And I was talking to him on, just trying to, pick his brain about taking a break and whatever. And we both kind of said like we would be so like almost sick the day of the podcast,
Hmm.
because not because like I didn't want to talk to anybody, or it wasn't that. It was totally me. Like it was a weird thing and something I couldn't understand why it was that way.
Hmm.
So I just decided, man, I gotta step back. And now I don't have those feelings of anxiety going into a podcast anymore. I mean, shoot, uh, I've recorded three. This is the third conversation I've had this week. Last week, I think I had three or four.
Hmm.
And I just have just a really great energy, and I'm really back to fully enjoying it again.
Yeah, and I think something about taking a break is it's one of those things that's like, I don't know if you're a big fan of puzzles or puzzle based games or anything. I'm a big fan of puzzle games. I know that for some reason, if I'm really stuck on something, if I just take, a day or two to step away from it and come back, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's exactly what why didn't I see this before?
Yeah, yeah,
It's something
yeah,
about taking a break and letting yourself kind of reset. It gives you new ideas, gives you new, ambition. And
yeah. It
at
just kind of
least,
releases that tension.
yeah, at least for me, it was, the big reason why I got inspired to do the current, season that I'm working on. I kind of took a couple weeks off and I was like, it'd be kind of cool to talk to some of my old guests again, start bringing
Hmm.
some of my friends back together. And so I got super excited about it and, went back to work and started getting, episodes scheduled. And it was like the most work that I had done on the podcast in like months, just because I finally had the energy and excitement to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know exactly where you're coming from on that, and it was, um, yeah, I think the podcast has gotten better just this
Hmm.
year already, and some of the people I've gotten to talk to this year already, I mean, even some of the episodes I haven't released yet, they've just been such incredible people, and just so blessed to have such a community that I'm able to reach out to and have these just really in-depth conversations with. It's
Hmm.
sometimes I just can't believe some of the things that come out of a podcast, like they never, that I never thought would. It's been a really interesting time. And and this goes back to the original thing on the podcast, is like my it's my favorite form of therapy. We talk about whatever therapy looks like to you. The podcast has been just so important to my own mental health, talking to people. And I'm an extrovert by nature. I
Hmm.
think you almost have to be to have a podcast where you talk to people.
Hmm.
And I'm a pharmacist, retail pharmacy. I mean, that's kind of part of the job as well. And I'm at my best, I'm at my happiest when I talk to people. And realizing that again, taking that break and stepping back into it helped me kind of remember that again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I podcast for the same reasons. It's there's a message to it. Obviously, there's some kind of goal you're reaching towards as a podcaster. You want people to take something away from your show, but there's always
Right.
that that internal purpose behind it too. Is kind of gives you like when I started my show, I wanted to teach people about agriculture, and now it's more so like I just want to have conversations surrounding agriculture that people can relate to and find enjoyable, and that I can learn from as well. And to your point, I think that this is kind of one of the reasons I really wanted to cover this episode. It gets it's nice to have a few episodes, every now and then where you just reflect on how your show is doing and how you're doing with it and kind of what you think is going well and all that kind of fun stuff. I mean, it kind of reflects like the big conversation around mental health and ag anyways. Are you taking time to think about, okay, how's this going, and what can I do to make it better, and having little check-ins and all that kind of fun stuff. I mean, it really adds value to your show and to your just appreciation for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is nice. It is one of my favorite things to do is to do what we're doing here, is for me to go on a podcast and talk about my podcast. Like, I mean, that's awesome,
Yeah.
right? That's so like refreshing and energizing to me. And I love it. I love to talk to people. I love to talk all things ag and mental health, and to share, and I think sometimes, and I'm happy that it's this way, because this what kind of keeps the podcast sustainable for me. Is I get I don't always get to share my full perspective when I'm talking to someone, and I'm not complaining about that. But it's fun to kind of have the roles reversed and
Yeah.
being a guest on a podcast. I think that's really, really a fun thing to do.
Yeah, no, I perfectly agree with you. I mean, there's some kind of, something kind of interesting about like, I always think these things, but I don't really ever get to add them to the
Mhm.
conversation. So it's kind of cool to get to have that
Yeah,
spot.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so that being said, what are some of the episodes that you've been doing? Have you had, a fair share of like ag and mental health guests, or what's been
So
your
let's see here. I'm trying to think here. I have pretty much everybody I've talked to this year has been in ag, in
hmm,
ag, eh, from somewhat. Um, I'm the craziest thing is I realize I've got like four people all from Purdue that I am going like talking to in the next month or so. Like that
wow.
was not planned, but like there's a couple students at Purdue, one person that works with Purdue Extension. It's just that wasn't the plan. It just kind of happened that way. So, uh, and for good reason, because I think Purdue's doing some really excellent work with farmer mental health and rural mental health. Really excited to talk to some of those people. Actually, my wife ran into the Purdue Extension folks FFA National Convention when she was there with our son, and she talked to them, and they had a big thing about mental health there. They're kind of rolling out this new program, so it's really cool that was a really cool thing where my wife was able to like make a connection for me. That doesn't happen very often in this kind of for us, because I'm the one that's outgoing. I'm the one that goes and talks to people and gets the guest, obviously. But it was cool that she was able to contribute to this as well. It's really it's just a really cool thing for because this is what I do is I consider it part of the family business. I do the work. Carrie, she's not necessarily active on the podcast, but she is very encouraging and very critical of me, which is a good thing. And then Levi edits the podcast. So it's a part of our family business. So it's cool that she was able to contribute like that. But the episode that I have coming out that I am the most excited for, and this is the one that I've already recorded it, and it's with a cowboy western country music singer by the name of Bryn Hill. Have you heard of him?
I haven't. No.
You go search him on Spotify. He's got, or wherever you get your music.
Yeah.
That's where I get mine. But anyway, he's just got loads of like this guy, and you hear the songs like, man, this guy should be popular.
Yeah.
And I was listening to some of his music, and his music like speaks about agriculture, rural America, cowboy way of living. And like, I remember I heard his music on Pandora one day when I was at work, and I was like, man, that's different. That guy gets something. He said, I can't remember what the words that were in the song, but like, that guy knows something to use that kind of language. So actually, I just found his website, reached out to him via email. He got right back to me and said, yeah, let's talk next week. So I recorded with him last week. It's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. And man, I am so excited for it, because that's a guy like I've listened to his music for probably 5 or 6 years now. And like, it's almost surreal. I mean, the guy's not, he's not George Strait or anybody, you know what I mean? But he's to me, I mean, he's somebody that I think has been very successful and done very well. So that one is so exciting, and that one's for personal reasons. We had a really great conversation around it, and it was cool to get his perspective of someone who's lived the life, but also is like a kind of related in a way to what you and I do as podcasters. He's a singer songwriter. He displays his media differently, or he expresses himself differently. But still, I still feel like it's similar. So it was cool to kind of see those similarities in his way of thinking.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I know how it feels to get like a big time celebrity, or like somebody kind of more popular on your show, and just like that little excitement of like, man, like they think that my show is valuable enough that they want to give their time to it. That's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. I had,
because you had Temple Grandin on, didn't you?
Yeah,
same.
Yeah.
That one was crazy for me, and I'm sure it was for you, because it was just like a surreal experience to be talking to her, because HBO made a movie about her.
Right.
A lot of people outside of agriculture know her for her work with autism. And it was like, and I'm sure you probably felt the same. It's like, man, I feel totally not worthy to be talking to you, but she didn't see it that way, which was cool. It was such a cool experience for me.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I've she's been a big, inspiration of mine since I was, early in my FFA career. I watched a lot of her videos and stuff as a freshman, and I grew up working with horses and cattle and being a very big fan of animal behavior, and she was like leading the pack in that research. So I still, like, to this day, I'm currently writing a curriculum for my college for an animal behavior class, and I reached out to her and she let me use her work for my curriculum. It's been like mind-boggling the amount of stuff that she's been like okay with us using. So I know, I know where we're coming from. It's amazing. I was just gonna go back to your interview with Brent Hill. I was gonna say there's a, because I'm a big fan of cowboy country. That's like my favorite genre of music. And my
Hmm.
go-to cowboy country artist is Dave Stamey. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all. Um he's
We
a
talked about him.
Did
I
we?
wasn't, but
Did we? Okay, I couldn't remember if I brought that up last time or not. That's he's I just started listening to him
no,
again.
no. Me and Bryn talked about
Okay.
him.
Okay. I was gonna say I don't remember
Yeah,
bringing him up,
yeah,
but that's amazing. He's by far my favorite. He's incredible.
yeah. Obviously, I'll have to check him out too because I love I love the cowboy. Michael Martin Murphy,
Yeah.
Corb Lund, Ian
Mm-hmm.
Tyson. I mean, even back Chris Ledoux.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I just because I you know I embrace, even though I'm not from the West, I feel like I was misplaced on this earth. I feel like I was supposed to be born in the West.
Yep.
Um, I wouldn't take it anyway. I love where I live, so I shouldn't say that, but I feel like I'm Western at heart. And something about the West and then the music of the West, the culture of the West,
Mm-hmm.
it just speaks to me.
No, I'm with you. I'm in the exact same boat. So I don't know if you're a big, Netflix watcher, but I love there's a show on there called Longmire that I just have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
I watched that whole show and then I rewatched it and then I just got my girlfriend into it, so we're rewatching it again. It just like it's something about that whole just Western, like cowboys and Indians culture is just so like attractive to me. That hearing you say you got to interview a cowboy country artist is just like that's like that'd be like my dream right there. That's so cool.
Yeah. And it's amazing how accessible people really are.
Right.
You don't like people. A lot of people, obviously the bigger names aren't as accessible, but you'd be amazed how easy it is to talk to so many people. And that's what's gotten me, like that's what the podcast has shown me, is like people are super accessible and people want to talk about stuff. People are,
Mhm.
for the most part, I mean, I've had very few people say, no, I'm not going to come on your podcast, which is okay. It's okay
Sure.
for people to say no to it. um but I, for the most part, people are so gracious with it, and they're so willing to share their story, no matter who listens or how many people listen. They just want to tell it, and it's incredible, and it's really fun.
Yeah. And I think that you're in a unique position. And especially, I think that a big reason why is a lot of those people, they live such like fast paced lives. They probably don't get to sit down and just have a fun conversation like that every now and then, very often. And so I think that, you provide a great platform for that because you have, a podcast that talks about, you have like the rural ag side of things. So you can really get some solid guests on that side, but you also have, mental health, which is such a huge topic, especially today's day and age. So it's like, you can really bring on anyone you want and you can have something to talk about. And that's such a great opportunity for your show. So I have no doubt that you have some really great conversations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to wherever. I mean, who knows? Somebody asked me one time, like, who's your dream guest? And at that time, it was Temple Grandin.
Hmm.
That was, and that's all it took was somebody asked me on a tweet, I think, and I was like, Temple Grandin. Well, I mean, that's all it took. Vance Crowe saw that. He had just had her on his podcast, and she helped me hook me up with her, and like it was like so unreal. Like, and so now it's just like, well, now who is there? So it's got me really trying to think, like, who are these big names that I could have a conversation with?
Right.
You know, and I don't know really anymore. Like, I don't. It's Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like somebody like Zippy Duvall, president
Oh
of
yeah.
American Farm Bureau. I mean, that'd be a super interesting person to talk to. And he's had his mental health issues, and Farm Bureau is huge about talking about mental health, and I can't commend them enough for that.
Hmm.
So there's people out there. So I'm very excited to see who those people might be.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I think that we need to start a fan club for ag podcasters who got to talk to Temple Grandin because that it seems to be a like a rite of passage. Um,
So I just realized that, and I hadn't found you on Facebook until this week when I reached out to you, and we have a ag podcasters Facebook group.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And yeah, so I will send you an invite to that tonight. Trevor Williams, it kind of started it. Do you know Trevor?
I don't.
The Farm Traveler podcast?
Okay, I know the podcast. I wasn't familiar with the name.
He's a yeah, he's a good friend of mine,
Hmm.
and he started that a couple years ago. So we'll get you, because it's been a very valuable resource. We'll get you in on that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But no, I think that, to your point about, who do we interview next? Like, there's so many people out there that are like, they can make good guests, but at the same time, it's like you know, at this point, do you even have like an ideal guest to strive for? Do you kind of just like let yourself grow bigger and then the ideal guest will kind of come to you, kind of thing? Or, like what's the, I can't say that I have a ideal guest, because like you, mine was Temple Grandin and that got answered pretty quick. Um, but no, that's super cool. I mean, I want to touch on your conversation about the Farm Bureau, because I think that's a really, like, I remember I reached out to you, this is a couple months ago now, about a Farm Bureau contest that I was actually doing, and one of the discussion topics
Mhm.
we were going to have to talk about was mental health and agriculture. And I plugged your podcast like crazy during that whole conversation, and it was like that was like my main point, and that's what actually won me that particular round of the discussion topic, was that people were like,
Oh,
man,
wow.
that's super cool. There's a resource out there. I'm like, go listen to it. It's real. It's really helpful. But it was super cool.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That's flattering. I appreciate that. But you know, and to answer the original part of the question, like, who do I go out look for people, or how does that happen? Um, Now I just let people come to me almost, or
Yeah.
just let it happen organically. It's really funny how it's changed over the podcast. Like, I remember when I first started the podcast, like, okay, I got to talk to these important people. I got to
Hmm.
talk to these people who have a following. Um, but now it's changed. Now I'm more interested in having the conversations with people and
Hmm.
talking about the things. Yeah, it's and I for me, as a podcast host, it's made my life and job easier,
Hmm.
because I find myself to be like, I found myself to be genuinely curious, and much like you and I are doing here today, I don't have a outline or a script, what have you, for the podcast. For the most part, we just get on and we talk.
Right.
And I can't tell you how refreshing that is, because used to, when I started the podcast, I get nervous, and I'd have to, oh, I got to write down all these things and make sure, and that helped me get started. But now I don't do that, and that's been very, like, because everybody's busy. I don't want to say that I'm busier than anybody else. Everybody has the same hours in the day. That's just up to you how you spend them. But I mean, that taking that time away from the prep work, I don't do the prep work like I used to. We have genuine, I make a connection with somebody, realize that there's an important conversation to be had, and then we go from there. And
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's very it makes it very easy on me, and I think it makes for a better podcast.
Yeah. And that, I think that mitigates a lot of the risk of, you're out there seeking, as many guests as you can get, and then you start getting, conversations that are a little lackluster, or that don't quite reach that, that genuine level that you're looking for. When you have that connection first, and then you kind of say, you know what, this will make a great podcast episode. Can we hop in a Zoom call and do this, real quick? That just adds so much to the episode and to the show. I can't tell you how good of a strategy that is, and how much, I think that other podcasters really need to. I mean, obviously when you start out, you got to try to get some kind of guests to start off with, but when you can get to that point where you're able to just allow yourself to just go with the flow and just like as the episode comes up, you just make you make it on the spot and you just go with it. It makes them sound so much more fun and genuine. It makes you enjoy them more, makes your guests enjoy them more and more likely to, to shout you out and kind of spread you to other people. Like that is, you're absolutely, I agree with you 100% on that. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's been the best thing for me, for again, for my own mental health, trying to make sure that I am well and I'm not spreading myself too thin,
Yeah.
and just relying on my curious mind.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So we talked about an ideal guest. Do you have an ideal episode, like a topic that you really want to talk about? You're just looking for the right person to cover it with?
You know, I don't I don't know. Not really, I don't think.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I talk a lot. So for me, it's a lot of things. I talk about I talk about my sobriety journey quite a bit now,
Hmm.
and I didn't have that. Um, that's a lot of my social media has come. That's where I've expressed myself for that. But I've only done a few podcasts on it. I did a whole month of talking about sobriety too. Um, and and for me, the reason I talk about that is not to hold it over somebody's head, or you know beat my chest and uh, be pretentious about it. I talk about it because I want it to be just as accepted.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I want two people to, I don't want that to, like, again, we talk about stigma. There's a stigma surrounding that,
Hmm.
and it's really important for me that that stigma be removed around alcohol, um, because it's it's just an accepted part of culture, and you're almost sometimes feel, and this may be perceived more than it's real, but you're perceived as like oh, sometimes as an outcast when you don't partake. And I found that is something that, I've found that that's something that's really important to me, is making, again, normalizing the conversation around that,
Hmm.
and kind of giving the people permission if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a really interesting and a very needed topic, to talk about. I was very much a like I refused to even touch alcohol for most of my life. It wasn't until like very recently, like
Hmm.
shortly after I turned 21, that I slowly started to, drink more. But to this day, I'm very much not much of a drinker. Like, I'll have like one drink for a social event and I'll just call it that. And you're absolutely right. That was a very much like I was almost a social outcast for my refusal of alcohol. Um, I was also the one that could take care of everyone else when they were about to pass out, but that was beside the point.
Hmm.
But no, it was, you're absolutely right. Having that conversation about, destigmatizing the necessity to drink alcohol is such a, I think an important topic. I mean, especially in our rural communities, because I mean, it happens all over the place, but it seems like it's almost like a natural coping mechanism for those in rural communities for some reason.
It is, because I mean, well, for me, it was how all the people that were important to me, especially the men, that's how they dealt with it. And I
Hmm.
just, and it was, I mean, it wasn't even anything to bat an eye to.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's another big reason is, like, I want to be maybe that example, like, oh, well, here's this guy that he doesn't have to do that,
Hmm.
or or chooses not to do that, I guess, is probably a more appropriate way to say that. And just challenges the thing. I'm all about challenging paradigms, right? That's
Hmm.
a big, I'm about challenging the paradigms around mental health. I'm about challenging the paradigms around production of agriculture.
Hmm.
So this is just another paradigm that I'm challenging, and maybe hopefully giving somebody point of view, because one of the most harmful things that can happen to someone is to get into an echo chamber, and everybody's the same, and we all turn out to be these robots and perfect curated whatever. And I don't want that to happen, and I think that's one of the great things about America is we can be different and still get along, still understand. And, that's another important thing that we talk about. I don't talk about politics on the podcast purposefully, but I do mention that I do bring people on that I disagree with politically. And we
Mhm.
don't talk about politics, but we do talk about the fact that we don't see eye to eye politically. The person that comes to my mind is Emily Kreckelberg. Her and I are on very opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we like to talk about cows, and we like to talk about mental health, and that's enough. We can put those disagreements or those things aside, and we can really focus on the things that bring us together. And I think that's a really important thing. Again, it all goes back to mental health. It's a really important thing to realize that you can disagree with someone on something and still like them, still be
Mhm.
their friend. I mean, hell, I don't agree with my wife on politics. So I mean, we live together. And so I mean, it's that's another unintended thing that I have done. I haven't done a lot of that, but I've made sure to um, definitely not exclude people I disagree with politically, and sometimes making a point to talk to them just to show that we can have rich conversations, no matter what our viewpoints are.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, I mean, I would consider, we were talking about, the paradigms that you like to challenge. I'm not sure if you consider yourself an agricultural education podcast. I would consider you an agricultural education podcast, from the perspective of you teach people about a side of agriculture that doesn't get talked about enough. Um, so from that, I would say, yeah, you're an agricultural education podcast. Um, I think that the general role of ag ed podcasts is to, challenge paradigms to a degree. There are some that are just generally just going to talk about FFA or some other ag leadership groups and that sort of topic. But the value that I find in ag education and challenging the paradigm of ag education is, like you just mentioned, kind of breaching those typical communication borders that we see. I mean, like my whole show is dedicated to talking to people who don't come from agricultural backgrounds, and more often than not, as you mentioned, they disagree with me politically, and that tends to, make itself apparent throughout the conversation, but it never once degrades the value of what we're saying. Because we still have that respect established, right? There's still the mutual agreement of, we're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about the things that keep you alive and that keep me alive, and that kind of unite us instead of divide us, as everything else is going on with the world. um and just having those conversations, that can be free of politics while still like remaining in the sphere that politics would typically occupy in the conversation, is just so, like you mentioned, there's almost like a relieving factor to it, to being able to disagree with someone and still like them, and still have those kinds of educational conversations that help everyone involved. They help the listener, they help the two people having the conversation. They just lead to better results, because having a different perspective, believe it or not, it's actually going to benefit the thought process at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of sometimes othering people and chastising people based on their political beliefs. So I mean, I'm not perfect in that, and I don't pretend to be, but I really try to challenge myself on that and get on. And I think that's another thing that is a big thing that I do is I try really hard to get uncomfortable. I, nothing. What's the quote? Nothing can grow in a comfort zone, and nothing. Gosh, I screwed it up. I don't know. I can't remember the exact quote, but what is it? Nothing can nothing. I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember. Gosh dang it. That's what happens. You get your mouth moves faster than your brain.
Oh yeah, I happens to me all the time. I don't blame you. Um, is it a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there? Is that what you're going for?
It's something like that. But there was something. Let's see. Comfort. Nothing ever grows inside of a comfort zone, and nothing. I gotta look it up now. It's gonna drive me nuts. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go for it. I always like adding new quotes to my roster. So, and you post the best quotes. I mean, I every time you post a quote, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm adding that to my book.
I try. I try. Okay, here it is. It's
All right,
from Jocko.
let's hear it.
Do you know Jocko Willink? There's no growth in a comfort zone, and there's no comfort in a growth zone.
I like that. That's beautiful.
Yes. Gosh, I knew it was. Uh, that's that. Like I heard that one time. Like, and so like that quote has pushed me so many times, and that makes me mad that I couldn't remember it because it's been so important to me. But I like anytime like I feel myself hurting or painful or something's hard, if anything's hard, I like again it goes back to Jocko. He's like, oh, it's hard, good. It means you're growing. It means something better is coming down the line. And that is that's a really a strong way to live, I think. And it's hard to live that way. I mean, right now I'm in the middle of I'm trying to shed some weight, um just a few pounds. And it's tough, man. It's tough to not eat the way I want to. But
Hmm.
the thing that's going in the back of my mind is, that's good. It shouldn't be easy to do these things. If anything worth doing is worth it, it's worth it to be hard.
Right. Yeah, no, that's always a policy that I try to implement wherever I can. If it's, the best things in life are never easy or if,
Right.
yeah, if it's like you said, if it's, if it's difficult, then it's probably worth it. But no, I mean,
Yep.
that's,
Yep.
I think that that's a fairly appropriate quote to reflect the entire mindset of, those in the ag industry. I mean, our entire career is, basically suffering to a degree. We're always trying to do something that's, next to impossible, but at the end of the day, it's going to be valuable because it's going to feed people. It's going to occupy space. It's going to, help people live their lives. Um, there's almost like like a, a codependency on agriculture and struggle.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean it's all about sacrifice too.
Hmm.
Nothing, you know, to do that, to live that sort of life that's full of sacrifices.
Hmm.
And but being able to embrace those sacrifices is to understand, it helps you try. I mean, it doesn't always work, but it can help you keep you from taking things for granted.
Yeah, definitely. No, I absolutely agree. Well, that kind of wraps up all the thoughts I had in my head. Is there anything else that you wanted to add on or talk about?
No, man, just I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on again. I encourage everybody go check out my podcast, check out my website. You can find me all over social media, all over any podcast platform. Ag State of Mind.
Awesome. Well, yeah, for sure. All your links will be down in the description. People will be able to find you all over the place, and I'll be promoting your podcast as I usually do. And I like to share around, contacts I think will help people. So I'll definitely be shooting your podcast to all the directions I can. But yeah, thanks again for joining me. This has been a
Well,
great conversation. Um, Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Brendan, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate all you do, and I appreciate the work that you're putting into to carve out your little part of place in this industry. It's very needed.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And as I mentioned, I think that you're doing a great thing, and I'll always be, more than willing to promote what you're doing, and kind of send people your way. So I'll be definitely doing that wherever I can. But yeah. So thanks again for joining me. It's always nice to have a nice little reflection episode where we get to kind of just relax and talk about all the cool stuff that's going on in our lives. So I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope the listener enjoyed it. And I hope to catch you all next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.